Hey everyone, today we're ranking all of Dead by Daylight's main structures. So this is only going to include maps that do have a main or unique structure, so most indoor maps aren't going to be in this. For this list we have 4 tiers: average structures, good structures, great structures, and amazing structures. To place each structure into these, we're going to give each structure a score out of 5 for balance, and another score out of 5 for design, for a total out of 10. This way we can rank both how fair it is, but also its visuals and such. Let's get into it. Starting off with the average structures. In last place we have the Strode House. This structure is found on Lambkin Lane, and is not balanced to say the least. The house of fun to some, the house of pain to others. This structure sucks for killers and is very powerful for survivor. It has great windows for them and a fairly easy loop to continue throughout the building. Visually, this structure is no different really to the other Haddonfield houses, with only the Strode sign and pumpkin really setting it apart. It's a nice call to Halloween though, so I'll bump the design numbers up a little bit. Next up we have the rather underwhelming office found on AZHYMOVS resting place. I don't really have much to say about this structure. It's kinda balanced, I guess. In some ways it's like having a second shack on the map, which can kinda suck for killer. Then again, there's also a breakable wall which makes the loot pretty weak, so I think it's somewhere in the middle. Not much to say in terms of design either. It's a little office area and doesn't really have much in it. It would be cool if we maybe got a few more hints to AZHYMOVS' personality and such, based on what's in his office. Yeah, that's it. Moving on, we have the Storehouse on Groaning Storehouse. This structure is quite survivor-sided, with a long and easy to run loop, a bunch of safe windows, with the only unsafe area being some bits in the center with some average pallets. It's your typical Macmillan structure, dilapidated and grey. It's got some cool, spooky elements to it, but there's only so much you can do to make a storehouse interesting. It is a good size though, and situated in a nice place on the map. This one may be a bit of a shocker, and maybe it shouldn't really be counted as a structure, but up next is the big tree on Shelter Woods. For balance, I'm saying it's pretty average, as it doesn't really affect both sides, aside it being a landmark and acting as a central point. It does somewhat block line of sight through the center too, I guess. I don't want to give it good balance either though, because it doesn't do anything to change gameplay really, although its presence doesn't really disrupt it either. Design wise, well, I mean it's a tree, and hey, for a tree it's pretty cool looking and gives the map a nice distinct feature. Next up we have the Lodge on Blood Lodge, or the Blood Lodge. This structure I would argue is quite killer favoring, largely due to its small size and lack of any safety really, aside one decent window. However, this structure does have a really cool look to it. It's this nice wooden lodge, which looks super cozy. It's nothing fancy, but I think it's worthwhile mentioning its cool visuals. The barn on Fractured Cowshed is a barn, and so design wise is fairly plain. A bit like the Macmillan Storehouse, this is just a barn on a farm, and so isn't the most elaborate or interesting. But hey, it's pretty spot on for being a barn. I would argue this structure has relatively decent balance in a weird kind of way. There are some very strong areas for survivors with windows that grant loads of distance, but equally breaking a few breakable walls can really destroy these and lean into the killer's favor. The main central area is fairly open with its high stacked hay bales. So balance wise, it's pretty middle of the road I think. The garage on Wretched Shop is not my favorite structure, but is a pretty balanced one. It's fairly similar to AZHYMOVS, but just provides a little more area and a bit more things or content to use for looping or mind games. Survivors have a solid loop around the structure, but again there's a breakable wall that kind of evens this out. So I would say it's pretty average and favors each side depending on the state of the structure. For design, it's just your typical Autohaven look. It's got some cool features inside the shop, like the tools lying around and the car in the center that we can assume was in there for repairs. All in all, it's a pretty harmless structure that gives the map a nice distinct feel. Let's move on to the good structures. The Fallen Silo is Torment Creek structure, and a pretty cool looking one. It has this very creepy design, and overall, despite it lacking much complexity, is very visually engaging. Equally, this structure is another one of those structures that is pretty solid for survivors until the breakable wall goes, where it then leans more toward the killer's favor. Overall, it's in the same spot of kinda balanced some of the time, but usually tilting in one side's favor depending on how the pallets spawn spawn, and if the breakable wall is up. The Sanctum on the Sanctum of Wrath is very killer-sided in my opinion, and has very little for survivors to use to their advantage. Lots of the good windows are kind of cancelled out by being high falls, meaning you don't gain much distance due to stagger, and the few pallets that can spawn are incredibly unsafe. It's even slightly, I feel, by its verticality and the decent amount of hiding spots available in and around it. For design, this structure is pretty solid, and looks really beautiful honestly. It's got these great arches, a cool collapsed statue, and lots of other statues surrounding the base, which will turn to face you when you look away. This structure is very unique, having an interesting layout and quite a visually different look. Badham Preschool is quite a survivor-sided structure, having a ton of safe pallets, particularly on the lower level. The main advantage killers get with this structure is the possibility of the basement spawning downstairs, and the occasional value you can get from the area being quite narrow with lots of turns and corners. Its design I think is very solid and is pretty spot on when it comes to recreating its look from A Nightmare on Elm Street. There's equally this eeriness and creepiness to it. The upper levels seem closer to normal, and then there's the creepy lower levels where it's poorly lit and claustrophobic. It's faithful to the film and has an interesting layout. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at Suffocation Pit's mines. The Macmillan mines, or really the entrance to the mines, is a cool structure. I think the layout of this structure is really interesting, and the entire feel of the structure itself has this spooky aura and presence to it. It feels like you can really picture Trapper leading all his workers into these mines and then sealing the entrance. Yeah, it feels very unnerving. For balance, it's another in the boat of favouring both sides at different points, but never really sitting to be quite balanced. Survivors can get good window spawns, and killers can equally invalidate these with breakable walls, and once the pallets have been dealt with. The ski lodge of Ormond Ski Resort is really carried by its visuals and design because it is by no means balanced. I feel for its visual uniqueness though, it's deserving to be above some of the other structures here. The structure has a really cool fireplace in the center, the Legion mural on the wall, and just feels very faithful to a ski lodge. It's this big expanse but also feels weirdly cozy and confined. It's got a cool outer area too, again looking very grand, with nice outer areas like the balcony. But yeah, this structure is very survivor-sided, containing tons of safe pallets and windows, and long loops that breakable walls only slightly help out with. Yeah, I really am putting this one up for its visuals. I just like them a lot. The Shock Therapy Center on Disturbed Ward is quite heavily survivor favoring, with it being incredibly large and filled to the brim with safe pallets and long, fairly easy to run loops. You can loop inside, outside, upstairs, downstairs. This place is filled with so much stuff. Yeah, it's definitely in the survivor's favor, I feel. Despite its downsides on balance, it's a visually stunning structure that's got an amazing design. It has so much detail, so much character, and there's clearly been a lot of care put into this. The whole environment is creepy and disturbing, and despite it all being in one building, there's a good variation of areas, like the glass domey area, the upstairs with the burning ceiling, and then the main hall is littered with lots of different asylum stuff. Very cool, very unbalanced. Coal Tower's tower is a pretty balanced structure that I feel is pretty close to nailing balance. There's some good windows and surrounding pallets for survivors, but equally breakable walls that really open this structure up, and the whole upper area is a much riskier area for survivors and beneficial for killers. Its visual design I think is not too impressive. It's quite small, which is fine, but the main portion of the design is on the upper areas, which are generally less visible in game, with the lower areas looking like a more generic structure. Still, I do like it, and in this case the fact that it's close to balance is just really nice to have. Next up we have the great structures. Let's start off with the pantry from Grim Pantry. I get the feeling this may be controversial, but I think this structure is actually pretty balanced. The upper area largely favors survivors, the lower area killers, but there's good benefits for both sides. There's a lot of pallets, but half of them are unsafe, and then there's lots of windows, but again, half of them are fairly unsafe. Most of the time it being a 50-50 split in terms of favoring each side. I personally don't mind it for either side. Its design isn't the most visually stunning, but it fits in with the swamp as an environment really well, as this creepy skeletal structure with rotting wood, and skeletons littering its floors. It's very disturbing and pretty creepy, but equally quite visually basic, and so I think design-wise it's pretty average overall. The abattoir is Rancid Abattoir's main structure. This structure I think favors the survivors a bit more, but is closer to balance than many other structures. The openness of it is a nice benefit for killers, giving little possibility to hide behind high walls, although there are quite a few powerful windows for survivors that can only be made slightly weaker after a breakable wall is broken. One side of the structure is also relatively relatively empty, so often you can catch survivors before they manage to reach any given window as a killer. I find the structure's design to be pretty amazing. It has a cool layout and features these winding fences. There's a creepy feel to it with the cows hanging from the ceiling and the blood splattered across the floor too. Gas Heaven's gas station is an equally well designed structure with really cool visuals and an interesting layout. I've always really liked the big neon sign that sits outside, which I would argue is part of the station itself. The interior has the shop area and also the garage section, with the outside having gas pumps. It keeps the creepy visuals and also lots of little details and features that makes it come to life as an area. It feels like a real gas station. It's similar to the abattoir also for balance, having some decent pallets and windows for survivors, but also some weaker ones and some openings for killers to shorten loops with breakable walls. There's a nice dynamic element too with the garage door opening upon a gen being completed, which does shake things up a bit. The Pale Rose has such a cool design, being what looks to be a paddle steamer boat, which is sunk into the mud of Backwater Swamp. It's got interesting dynamic features like the murder of crows that perches on it and fly away when the generator on the boat is completed. Further, the collapsing wood and abandoned look of it is really disturbing and unnerving. For balance, I don't think the structure is too bad. It's got a decent amount of good windows and pallets for survivors, but equally these typically have to be dropped or vaulted fairly quickly, otherwise the killer can easily catch up and close down loops due to the structure being fairly small and confined, despite looking so big externally. Okay, back to Coldwind Farm. We have the Thompson House on the Thompson House map. This structure used to be quite killer favoring, with only a few routes in and out of the building's upper floors. Now it has a few different ways to escape the top floor, like holes, windows, and the stairs. It's pretty escapable for survivors and definitely nearer to being balanced. I would say it still does favor killers though, with lots of the exits leaving you exposed and often not giving you much of a head start unless you're running balanced landing or something. For lots of them you have to drop from high places and suffer that stagger effect. This structure can often have quite a deadly basement too. Again, it's closer to balance now though for sure. For design, I think this structure is actually great. It feels like a proper house that's been lived in and slowly run into disrepair by the hillbilly, with loads of gross visuals like the slaughtered pigs and such. It looks like the whole place is rotting, and you can only imagine the horrendous smell. It also fits in very well with the surrounding farm and corn. The saloon on the map Dead Dog Saloon is one of my personal favourite structures, although I don't feel it is particularly balanced. It's another one of those weird ones where it's never really balanced, it just seems to always favour one side slightly over the other. There's a bunch of breakable walls too, maybe a little too many. It's a pretty exhausting amount for both sides I feel. These are kinda necessary though, otherwise the survivors have some really strong windows. The design of the saloon is really great and has such a cool atmosphere. There's the piano playing on its own, the empty dusty bar, and then the creepy and creaky upper floors. This is one of my personal favourites and a structure that looks really great. Finally, we have the amazing structures. Up first is the temple from the Temple of Purgation map. This structure has a pretty average balance. It's got this weird variation of strong areas mixed with awful areas for both sides. The lower areas can be an easy place to corner survivors as killer, and then the upper areas have lots of good windows for escape as survivor that can be hard to follow as killer. This structure also has 3 different floors or levels, with there being a fairly useless top level with a big drop down. Its size can be a bit much however, especially as the surrounding map is also very big. Visually, this structure is awesome. It's got such an amazing design and scale. It's big and impressive with cool and intricate metalwork mixed with the big grey bricks. This structure feels like a real spectacle and makes you feel so small even as a killer. Okay, onto the ironworks of misery. This structure's visuals are equally grandiose and visually impressive. I find this to just be a very fun structure to move around in. There's this big cauldron smelting thing in the center, the ironworks I guess, then the walkway running above and around the outside of the structure is also really cool. The whole area looks so harsh and really creepy now that it's abandoned. It's not the most balanced, but I think it's fine. Its size is more of a problem due to the surrounding map also being really big, a bit like Temple. However, I do like the risk involved with this structure. If a survivor, say, decides to go into the upper areas with a killer close behind, dropping isn't an option due to the stagger, yet the window can often be hard to reach in time. Yeah, I like that element of risk to it. Equally, a killer misjudging distance can lead to an incredibly long chase. Alright, this one I didn't really expect to be so high, but the wood cabin from Mother's Dwelling. This I think is actually quite balanced. It benefits from being quite small but having enough things for survivors, like decent windows and surrounding pallets, but equally areas for killers to gain advantage or mind game to get the upper hand. This structure is also a nice size considering how big the map as a whole is. For design, I really like this structure too. It feels very cozy and very fitting to its surrounding environment. It really feels like the kind of cabin you'd find out in those woods. It's got stacked up firewood, the cool little table, and the antlers mounted up on the wall. Next up we have the family residence from the family residence map. This structure I believe is quite balanced. It's sizable, but it doesn't really give a huge benefit to either side. It's more of like a large stable structure on one end of the map. I would say in fact there's many other tiles that are better for looping than this main structure, and equally for mind games too. Yeah, I think it's pretty balanced. Fair windows generally, enough to loop but not enough to make it loopable more than a couple times, and generally a clear and open plan. The visuals of this structure are also great looking, with cool little details inside like the Oni mask and murals. It's got that similar creepy feeling to something like Thompson House, where it feels haunted still by the events that happen there. For a less balanced overall map, this is a pretty good main structure I think. Finally, to end this list off, we have the chapel from the Father Campbell's Chapel map. This structure is quite a middle ground one for looping, with only a few formations that can really favour one side or the other, although generally this can be fixed by breaking a breakable wall. Largely, for every window there's a drop down, for every breakable wall there's a window, and for every pallet there's enough of a chance to mind game it. This structure is pretty close to balance, but is by no means there just yet. This structure has a really great design, having similar elements to Disturbed Ward. One of the coolest features is the bell that has fallen through the roof, shattering it. The benches in the lower area are toppled or burning, and this is really disturbing feel to it all. There's also a somewhat grand nature to the structure too, despite it being quite small in actual size. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and be sure to drop your own thoughts on this down below. Thanks, and goodbye.